Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben.
This is Diego Sanchez, Randy Couture,
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Ho, ho, ho. Welcome to the UFC 245 preview show. I'm Dennis Shkaradov here with Kasper Rozdilowski on the final episode of Submission Radio for 2019. Cass, I feel like it's only fitting to finish off the year by breaking down one of the most exciting cards in 2019 in UFC 245.
That's right, man. A big, sexy, juicy card stacked to the tits, absolutely diced to the socks. So who better to bring on than Luke Thomas and John Morgan? I believe if there was like a Mount Rushmore of MMA media members, these two guys, without a shadow of a doubt, would definitely make up two of those members. So Luke Thomas will be breaking down the top three fights, the title fights, Amanda Nunes, Germaine De Randamie, Alex Volkanovski and Max Holloway, and of course Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington. Luke will be not only taking a look at the storylines, but also the technical side of things, because that's exactly what he's good at. And then John Morgan will be helping us preview some of the undercards, some of the other massive fights on there. Obviously, Jose Aldo returning, or I should say making his Bantamweight debut. Obviously, you got Matt Brown, you got Jessica I, you got Urijah Faber versus Petr Yan. So there's quite a few things to discuss on this Submission Radio end of year episode.
Oh man, absolutely. And as we wrap up, I mean, just a quick a thank you to all of our listeners for sticking with us in 2019. We were lucky enough to be a part of some crazy moments. I mean, from the BMF title fight to Nate Diaz's return, you know, to a stadium show in Australia where Israel Adesanya became champion. So many great moments. So thankful for this year. And, you know, it's funny because we're wrapping up technically, you know, if you're counting the shows, we're kind of at episode 199. You and me decided to do something special, Cass. We wanted to come back in 2020 and really do Submission Radio 200 properly, so we could really celebrate what these 200 episodes have been about. So we're excited to say that the first episode you guys are going to hear back in 2020 when we come back with Submission Radio will be Submission Radio 200. It is right now scheduled to come out on the week of the final week of January. So we'll be taping it on the 29th of January. It will be coming out on the 30th of January. We've got some good plans for that. But before we even get into episode 200 of Submission Radio, Cass, people can expect some interesting coverage as well.
Yeah, that's right. UFC 246, Conor McGregor's return against Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Musashi is officially on board as our sponsor, as they have been sponsoring us for quite some time and really making these trips possible. And the boys ride again. It is only fitting that, you know, these days with budgets and all, which we really, as much as we would love to go to pretty much every single event, as much as we would love to be in Vegas right now for UFC 245, the budget only permits us to go to the biggest of big events during the year. And so 243 was in our hometown, 244 the BMF title, 246 the boys ride again for Conor McGregor returning against Donald Cowboy Cerrone. So I'm very excited to bring you guys the absolute best coverage that we can provide for you.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy start to 2020, and straight out of Melbourne, as you can see the T-shirts and me and Cass. If you guys want to become a part of the Submission Radio family, and I mean you are by listening to the show, but if you want to get a bit more official, make sure to check out our merch store. Maybe get that special MMA family member, MMA fan in your family, a special gift, and make sure you can rep Submission Radio for 2020 because we have some big plans. And, you know, Cass, I mean, just quickly, before we jump to this interview with John Morgan, 2019, I mean, I want to thank you, of course, you and me having some crazy adventures as always with Submission Radio. I want to thank you, of course, and I want to say, man, what another crazy year in the life of Submission Radio 2019 has been.
Dude, it's been insane, you know. Likewise, man, it's absolutely mutual. I could never see myself doing this with anybody other than yourself, you know, from being on community radio, you and I at, 15, 16 years old, to now being 30, respectfully, you'll be 31 January 18th. So to be doing this together and to be doing this on this platform and have all of you guys listening, it's absolutely insane. You know, massive thank you to all the guests that have been kind enough to give us their time this year, all the phenomenal media outlets that have been publishing our work and using our interviews to create articles and headlines. We thank you guys because we couldn't do it without you guys. And of course, most importantly, you, the listener, listening right now, dropping comments in the comment section below, you know, giving us all the thumbs up. And I always think, and a lot of people say it, we're very lucky because our comment section is probably some of the most positive comment sections that there is. You look at other outlets, other channels, other podcasts, and you know, they're not nearly as lucky as we are. So a massive thank you to you guys for being so kind to us week in and week out.
That's right. So before we jump to it, just quickly, a quick reminder for everybody out there. You guys can get in touch with us. You have any feelings on the show, any takes, you can get in touch with us through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We do run those outlets, those social media pages ourselves. I said outlets, Cass, because I do find it interesting that I've had people come up to me, or I've heard conversations and people will say, oh, I'm a big fan of Submission Radio. How long have you been working for them? They're a great outlet. And at the end of the day, it's just you and me running things. You know, people kind of look at us as a MMA fighting or an MMA junkie because they see these social media posts and they see us sort of all over the place. And to a lot of people, it kind of seems like Submission Radio is, you know, this big outlet that employs all these people, but it's just you and me doing it, and you and me doing it for almost 200 episodes, and you and me doing it in 2019. And I think I'm just thankful for the fact that we've been able to go this long and have this much fun in the industry. I just find it funny when people see the outlet as this huge thing when it's always just been you and me doing our thing and having a good time doing it.
Yeah, this isn't like WWE or WCW where there's a secret consortium or a secret financial backer. You know, everything's pretty much self-funded by us, other than the times when we're lucky enough to get sponsors like Musashi to jump on board. And yeah, man, absolutely crazy to be doing it this long. And yeah, there's no evil genius or puppet master. It's just Dennis and myself and the fantastic videographers that we're often blessed with. But without further ado, this feels like a Thanksgiving episode, giving so much thanks to everybody. I feel like if we were better prepared, we'd be wearing like Santa hats or something. I think you even did that last year, Dennis. But without further ado, a couple of sexy guests. This is the UFC 245 preview. I'm very excited about this one. And our first guest is on the line. And Dennis, you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our first guest is known around the world for delivering some of the best MMA coverage for many, many years. Known as the Indiana Jones of MMA, him and Kenny travel the world from Russia to Australia, from China to Brazil, from fight night to pay-per-view. You can rely on this man to have you covered. A man who really should be sponsored and should be the face of one of the major US beer companies. He joins us here on the final episode of Submission Radio of the year ahead of UFC 245. We welcome our friend John Morgan back to Submission Radio, live from Robert Drysdale's gym. John, it's good to have you, man.
Hey, man, it's always a pleasure to be on with you guys. I never had the Indiana Jones comparison before. I like that, but the beer sponsorship thing, I'm into that. We need to make this happen. It's been far too long.
Is it coming any closer? What's going on? Because I feel like we've been shopping this around for a while. What's happening?
Yeah, we shop around a little bit. We get the occasional drop in. We need a long-term partnership though. But I am happy to say that the fine folks at Latchkey Brewing down in San Diego, California, are sponsoring this week's episode of the MMA Roadshow. So we'll be enjoying their frosty beverages at recording time.
Oh, Latchkey doing good things for the MMA Roadshow, and we expect you to be walking around Fight Week with a whip from now on, because you are the Indiana Jones of MMA media. If not a hat, at least a whip, you know? Yeah, that's right.
I was going to say, sir, what I do in my private life is up to me, sir. We'll leave it there.
Well, then you can then they'll open up a new avenue of sponsors for the MMA Roadshow. But obviously, quite a card this weekend, John Morgan, for UFC 245 in your hometown, in Vegas. I mean, it must be great for you to sort of take a short trip out there to the arena to do what you do best. But this also brings us to the end of another fantastic year, the end of 2019. So now that we're a few weeks away from the end of the year, how do you look back on 2019 as a year for you and obviously MMA Junkie and the Roadshow itself?
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting year, man. I'm happy to wrap it up in Las Vegas. I will say, by the way, the schedule this year, I'm loving it, man. I mean, this is the first kind of Christmas week in as long as I can remember, that I'm going to have a normal time with my family. You know, normally we're doing a big Vegas event, and this time it's moved up to December 14th. So I like it. But no, it's been a good year. I mean, we're traveling a little bit less, going to a little bit, fewer of the international fight nights and that sort of thing. But I think that's just kind of a reality as the UFC continues to spread around the globe. It's tough to go to, Shenzhen, China one week and Uruguay the next. I mean, it's tough to do that. So, we're kind of having to adjust the way we cover things. But, it was still making it to, going to Abu Dhabi this year was spectacular. The stadium show, obviously in your neck of the woods in Australia, was phenomenal. That'll be a great memory as well. So, man, another great year. The first year of the ESPN era for the UFC. So it's been a big one, man. I mean, things this sport is always growing. And you said end of the year, end of a decade too. It's crazy. Yeah. We're working on content at MMA Junkie that we're going to roll out, kind of looking on back on the last 10 years. And I've actually been sitting down and doing some videos and writing some stories. And it's been wild to sit back. Think about this. 10 years ago, you couldn't even watch all the UFC fights. There were dark matches that happened that you could only see them if you were in the arena. Now, thanks to the internet, I mean, you can pick up your phone and you can watch every fight from start to finish anywhere you are in the world, So it's it's been a crazy year, crazy 10 years.
Oh man, it's been crazy. And I just love the fact that we got to see you on a 30 for 30. Speaking about Tito and Chuck, that was pretty cool, man. Another great job by John Morgan there. Now, UFC 245, super stacked from top to bottom. We want to get your thoughts on some of the earlier fights on the card. John, first off, Mike Perry is back, and he's coming off a loss to Vicente, which is, nothing to hate him about. Vicente's a super tough fighter. He takes on Neal, who is at 29 years old, very, very impressive. He's on a five-fight win streak in the UFC if you include his win on the Contender Series. I mean, for a lot of people, they think, okay, this is a chance for Mike Perry to come in here and get a win and sort of get back in the win column. But, Neal's far from an easy fight. I mean, what do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, I don't see it that way at all, to be honest with you. I see it, number one, as being a very, very fun fight. I mean, these two guys love to get in there and stand and bang. So I think we're looking for something very, very exciting. But, yeah, if anybody's looking at that, at this type of fight for Mike Perry, man, they're thinking wrong about this. Jeff Neal is the real deal. To me, this is more of a test of Jeff Neal or saying, like, what do we got here? It looks like we got something. Are we going to fast track him? Are we going to slow build him a little bit? I mean, he's got some skills. This, to me, is more of a test of where Jeff Neal is than I think where Mike Perry is. Well, we know what Mike Perry is going to do. He's going to come in there. He's going to make for a fun fight. He's going to entertain. But this is absolutely no gimme fight whatsoever.
How do you think Mike Perry is going to fare, sort of, given some of the damage he's sustained, especially to his face recently? I imagine that's going to be something interesting to see him come back from.
Absolutely. I think the thing is, with damage like that, I mean, sure, the physical part of it is a problem, but it's the mental part of it that I think you worry about a little bit. I mean, I think even Rory McDonald was talking about that, right? I mean, he had a horrific nose injury, and he said, listen, man, I was a little bit hesitant. I was a little bit timid, and I don't think there's any normal person that wouldn't be. Well, Mike Perry is not exactly a normal person, so I don't think he's going to be. I think he's got the mindset to deal with that. So overall, yeah, we'll see. Now, like I said, is there lasting physical damage that becomes an issue? That is something to monitor. But in terms of, is the mindset going to be an issue? I don't think so. Mike Perry's he's cut from a different cloth, man.
A lot of tough matchups on this card for some of the fan favorites. I mean, we're looking at the main card here, and Yan takes on Urijah Faber. I mean, we saw Faber return at 40. It seemed like when he'd be returning, it would be for some big fights, maybe with some fellow legends. Now this is the second fight that he's taken on against another young guy who's dangerous in the division. Yan is actually a guy that many people believe might be one of the best in the division. Someone people believe could be a future champion. What was your reaction when you saw they were putting him up against Urijah Faber at UFC 245?
It's crazy, man. I mean, that's what this sport is, right? You stick around long enough and you're no longer the guy, right? I mean, Urijah Faber, a Hall of Famer. But, this is not an easy matchup for him. This is not, some kind of, this is a young, tough, hungry up-and-comer that, as you said, I think a lot of people are pegging to be a future champion. So, to be honest with you, all the respect in the world for Urijah Faber because, I mean, he doesn't need to fight from what I understand. Financially, he's done very well for himself. He's doing it because he loves it and he has a passion for the sport. But to be willing to face a young, hungry killer like Petr Yan, that shows me a lot of respect on Urijah Faber's part. And he believes at 40 years old, he believes, look, I've kept my body in shape. I've kept my mind focused. I can compete with anybody in the sport. So that said, man, this is a tough fight for Urijah Faber. I'm leaning towards Yan in this fight.
And if Yan does win over Faber, which I think most people, including ourselves, are expecting him to do, what do you think that win does for him? You know, getting a win over a guy who is a big name, a legend of the sport, but I don't think really people are expecting a whole lot from Urijah Faber at his, you know, slightly older age these days. You know, he's obviously got, Yan would have Sterling in the division. You've always got Corey Sandhagen, who's in this weird situation with Frankie Edgar. What does this win do for Yan?
Listen, I think this would be a huge win for Yan. I mean, yes, you're right. You're not talking about necessarily vintage Urijah Faber, but it's still a name. The name Urijah Faber still carries some clout. And the other thing is timing. As you said, the Corey Sandhagen, I think first of all, I think it's a little too soon for Sandhagen, but he's right there. I mean, he's knocking on the door. Meanwhile, you got Aljamain Sterling. I think Aljamain is definitely the number one contender, but he's out right now. He's having some injury issues to deal with. And because of that, I think that allows, you know, a win here for Petr Yan to kind of slip in the back door, so to speak, and use timing to his advantage. So I think we could very well be talking about a potential title shot. And, you know, let's not forget the UFC is still trying to grow that Russia market, and you know, it's a key market for them moving forward. This would be helpful for them. So, I think Yan could potentially walk into a title shot here.
It's funny because we're going to be talking about Aldo as well in a second, and this is going to be another legend. He's going to be trying to get a title shot. But before we get to this Aldo fight, what is going on with this situation with Frankie Edgar, in your opinion? I mean, he's going to be fighting the Korean Zombie back at featherweight. Then they're hoping that Frankie can make a turnaround for January 25th to make his bantamweight debut. I mean, surely this can't be the plan, John. Set things straight for us. What are you hearing there?
I mean, listen, I think everybody's hoping, but I think if they're being realistic with themselves, you know, behind closed doors, I just can't see that fight happening. I understand why they had to turn to Frankie Edgar. I mean, the South Korea market, it's a big market for the UFC as well, man. I mean, there's some talent developing there. And you know, they weren't able to go there for a little while because the arena in Seoul was under construction, but they want to continue to gain a foothold there. You need a real opponent for the Korean Zombie, and Frankie Edgar is exactly that. But, man, just... Listen, anything can happen, but to rely on somebody coming out of a fight like that against a high-caliber opponent like that, especially one that loves to scrap, I mean, to think that he's going to be clean and ready to turn around that quick, hey, fingers crossed. I'd love for it to happen. Frankie Edgar, a legend of the sport, and if he can put in back-to-back fights like that, not have to have a full training camp, not have to have time off, then man, I'd love to see it for him. But if I'm being honest, man, I think that's a big ask.
100%, especially depending on how that fight goes. Dennis just mentioned it. Jose Aldo making his bantamweight debut. I mean, he looks like he's been stuck in a desert for months without any food or water. You know somebody's ridiculously shredded when they have veins on their abs. It's very rare that you see that. You're actually going to be around the guy, you know, during fight week this week. Do you think he makes it to fight night? And what kind of Aldo can we expect, you know, after dropping so much weight?
I was really surprised to see this move, to be honest with you. And, you know, listen, I will say there are some pictures that look worse than others. So, I mean, it's, you know, angle and lighting. How did Kung Lee say it was? You know, it's all about the lighting and that sort of thing. But I will be anxious to see him on the scales on Friday. And because, I mean, listen, I mean, we're all talking about the struggles of weight cutting, you know, on a weekly basis. But, yeah, man, this looks hard. I mean, he does look shredded. It does look like he's trying to do it the right way. He's not, you know, rapid cutting right at the end. It looks like he's working his way down. But, man, I just don't know how you bring yourself that low and then be 100% the next night. And, again, to face a killer like Marlon Moraes, I mean, it's not like you're going in there with some scrub that you can say, well, you know, even if I'm at 60%, I should be able to compete with this guy. No, you need to be at 100% if you're going to be with Marlon Moraes. So I'll be honest, I don't necessarily love this move, man. I think maybe if anything, if Aldo was looking for a fresh start, you know, I might have enjoyed seeing him go the other direction, you know, going up to 155. He's small, don't get me wrong. He would be very small for the division, but man, this bantamweight cut, again, it's hard to tell from a picture, you know, exactly what all it entails, but it doesn't look like it's going easy for him.
Well, when you look at this matchup, we're going to have his debut in the division, a weight cut for the first time, so we'll see what he looks like in that octagon. But what are you expecting from this fight with Moraes? Are you giving Aldo much of a shot here, or do you believe Moraes is going to be able to have a big night in the office this weekend?
I think you have to give Jose Aldo a shot, man. The dude is one of the greatest of all time. I mean, it sucks that so much of his legacy is built around a result against Conor McGregor. I mean, I know that'll always be held over him, but when you look at the body of work, Jose Aldo, unquestionably one of the greatest of all time. You could make an argument that he's the best featherweight of all time, at worst, second behind Max Holloway. So he's a legend, and he's still very competitive. He's shown in recent matches that, he's got skills. He can still perform. It's just this weight cut. How is he going to handle 135? Because he's going to have to be on point. Marlon Moraes, an absolute monster. He really is, and good in all the same places that Jose Aldo is good. It's not like it's a clash of styles where one person is going to try to implement one thing over another. No, I mean, they match up very, very well. So, man, this is a tough ask for Jose Aldo as well. So, yeah, as you kind of alluded to, the first two fights on the pay-per-view, I think they had very similar themes. You know what I mean? You have true MMA legends going against, kind of this new generation and seeing who's going to deliver.
So let's just break it down for a second. Let's say Aldo just shocks everyone and wins here, or let's say even like Faber shocks everyone and wins here. Who gets the title shot in your opinion? Let's say one of the legends is able to pull it off. We know Henry Cejudo is looking for one of those big matchups, when he comes back and defends his title. Aldo versus Faber, let's say both legends defy the odds. In your opinion, who should get the title shot next?
Assuming they're both similarly spectacular wins, so that not one wasn't a boring decision. I'd probably say it's Faber, to be honest with you. I mean, Aldo would probably be the guy that most deserves it. The body of work, the legendary status he had, his tenure as a champion. But let's be honest, man, Faber is one of the most marketable guys on the roster, and God bless Aldo for all of his skills. He never really embraced kind of the marketing side of it. He never went out of his way to learn English. Not that you should have to learn English, but we get it. That's where a lot of the business is done in English. And I don't think he cares too much about marketing and building things up. Meanwhile, Faber, he embraces it, man. He's the quintessential company man. So, if all things are equal, the results are equal, and it was one of those two guys, I'd probably say Faber, to be honest with you.
Wow, I think that makes a lot of sense. We're going to get a few quick predictions from you and your thoughts on the main events, or the triple main event, so to speak, 3 title fights. But, we mentioned this is a stacked card. You got people like Jessica Ai, Matt Brown fighting Ben Saunders, a whole bunch of other people on the undercard as well. Any fights that, you're especially looking forward to, earlier on in the night? Maybe a couple of sleeper fights or one sleeper fight.
I mean, listen, there's a lot of them for me. I mean, obviously the easy one is Matt Brown versus Ben Saunders. I mean, that's not a sleeper. I think everybody knows exactly what we're going to see there. Two dudes that have a penchant for violence. So I'm excited for that. I'd say for me, listen, I'm partial to the lighter weight classes, man. So Kai Kara France versus Brandon Moreno, to me, is a very, very relevant fight in that flyweight division. So I love that. And look, Chase Hooper kind of making it to the UFC, the guy that's been on a developmental deal. He's the teenage dream. He's now making it to the UFC roster. That's something to keep an eye on. So there's gems all up and down. So I really do. We say stacked card a lot, but this is stacked not just at the top with 3 title fights, but I mean, to me, there's not a fight up and down here where I look at it and go, I don't really no. There's names here, there's storylines, there's impact on the division. This is a really, really good card.
Well, I'll tell you what, Casper mentioned it. Big 3 fights headlining the card. We want to get your thoughts on this one, man. I mean, but before we jump to it and get into it, UFC Fight Week with Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman about to kick off. You'll be front and center for it. What are you expecting here, man? Because there's a lot of cringe that happens between these two whenever they get in front of each other. A lot of stuff going down. Are you expecting things to go to plan, to business as usual, or are people getting attacked in buffet lines and in between hotel rooms before this fight even happens in the octagon?
Listen, I think these two guys know enough that, hey, that the fight is on Saturday night and the paychecks are on Saturday night as well. So let's skip the buffet line trash talk for now. That's already been done. It's already been set up. I think they're professionals. I do think we're definitely going to see some back and forth between this two. Colby Covington just can't help himself, man. He's over the top all the time. And Kamaru Usman, I don't think he enjoys playing the game. I think he is legitimately upset and angry. And I think we're going to see some more of what we saw in New York with that kickoff press conference. I don't think these two guys will cross the line. I think they understand what's at stake, and I think they understand that they want to get in there on Saturday night and hurt each other. But I'm excited for it. I'm just glad it's happening. Listen, I like Colby Covington a lot. I really do. Behind the scenes, he's a lot different than what he portrays. Yeah. I even think he's gone a little bit a little bit too far in this build-up. You saw the Glenn Robinson's family coming out and saying, "Listen, man, you got to use our dad's passing to promote your fight." And I agree, stuff like that. It's like, come on, man, it's a little too much for me. But Colby made people care about him, and let's be honest, people did not care about him until he started talking. But he deserves this fight. This is a fight that I've wanted to see for a long time, regardless of all the bad blood between them. I think these two guys are two of the best in the division right now, and I'm excited to see the fight.
Yeah, and I think when you use something like that in a press conference and Kamaru Usman just kind of shakes it off, I think it's a pretty good indicator that these guys are going to be just fine around each other around fight week, and both guys are going to make it to the fight. If you had to pick, though, how this fight goes and who do you expect to be walking out as a welterweight champion at T-Mobile Arena this weekend?
Here's what's going to be interesting is that I do think it's going to be a fantastic fight. For a casual fan that maybe doesn't know these guys well enough or doesn't know the sport enough, I think it may not live up to what they want it to be, because you think about these two guys that they're both very grappling heavy in their approach, very wrestling heavy in what they do, and I do think we're going to see a lot of positions against the fence, a lot of clinch work being done, groundwork being done, and so I think it may not be the all-out bloodbath slugfest that some people want to see, but I do think it's going to be a technically sound battle. These guys are really good, and they can go 5 rounds. I'm leaning towards Kamaru Usman. I believe that he can match Colby Covington in all areas, and I do think that he's the superior athlete here. I think he can win, but listen, it will not shock me if Colby Covington wins this title. I know people want to downplay him because they hate him, but if you're sleeping on Colby Covington's skills, you're making a mistake. He is an incredibly talented individual.
It's interesting because the division right now is super wide open. And, of course, if Covington becomes champion, John, you've got this rivalry with Masvidal. And if Kamaru wins, then Masvidal's there as well. But I'm just wondering, do you think the UFC sort of plays it a little bit differently this time around, keeps Masvidal on the side for these big marquee fights? I mean, you've got people like Woodley, Leon Edwards, possibly fighting to fight for the title next. Do you think the UFC sort of separates Masvidal out of the scene and sort of books him on the side while this division plays itself out and other people fight for the title?
If Usman wins, I think they do. If Covington wins, I think that rivalry is way too tasty, especially with the belt involved. I think you get Masvidal involved. I think if Usman wins, there's other fights where Masvidal can make just as much money without fighting for the title and can get just as much attention. So, yeah, I think if Usman wins, Masvidal in the title fight isn't a priority. But if Colby wins, come on, man. That would be a grudge match for the ages.
Just really quickly on Masvidal, do you think the UFC want to do Masvidal versus Conor McGregor? Because I think a lot of people believe that Masvidal might just be too much for Conor McGregor at this point, especially at welterweight, and the UFC would prefer to steer McGregor towards, maybe lightweight or maybe even a Nate Diaz, anything except for Masvidal. Or do you think it's just that would be such a massive fight that they would want to do it and take the quick payday?
Well, that's it. I don't think necessarily if they were able to plan things out that would be the fight that they would go with. But if Conor is saying that that's what he wants to do, and you can get Conor motivated and into a fight, I think you do. He's a proven draw. He's a proven commodity. And even if you don't think it's the best fight available for him, if that's what he wants and that's what it's going to take to get him in the cage, I think you concede and you go with it.
It's going to be fascinating during the fight week for Cerrone if McGregor brings it up, because we all know the power. Like, even when Masvidal and Diaz got their fight put together, I think a McGregor talking about that fight might be too much for the UFC to stop it. Let's talk about Alex Volkanovski, though. You know this man better than most other US media members. You've seen him fight many, many times. He's getting his title shot against Max Holloway. You know the journey that he's had to the title, fighting injured, back-to-back win. I mean, this win streak is crazy. At certain times, having to move back home with his parents because he didn't have the money, to survive fighting. Not knowing whether he was going to get signed to the UFC. Now he's finally had this title shot. We don't know if he's 100% because he's got a good poker face, but he's looking better than ever. He's beaten Chad Mendes, Jose Aldo, and now he's on his way to fighting for the title here against Max Holloway. How are you looking at this fight, John? Are you picking the upset here for Volkanovski, or is Max Holloway just too good right now?
Well, I'm going to tip my hand a little bit. I am leaning towards the upset right now.
Wow, juicy.
And listen, I know it's a tall order, man. Max Holloway is an absolute monster. I mean, yes, we saw him lose in a step up to lightweight, but what he's accomplished at featherweight, it's incredible. I mean, you think about the way he finished Jose Aldo twice and just the run that he's had. Max Holloway is incredible, but I am just so impressed by Alexander Volkanovski, both physically and mentally. And I love the fact that Volkanovski has been talked about, as you said, you mentioned the journey, the path up here. I mean, listen, he was confident from day one that this is where he deserved to be and where he was going to be. You know, he's not going to be overwhelmed by the moment. This is exactly what he has expected, exactly what he's wanted, exactly what he's been working for. And now he's got the opportunity, and it's been really fun to watch him develop along the way and to see him take each step of this journey. Now, as you said, he's got a heck of a poker face, and it comes. You know, we find out after the fact that he wasn't 100%. Well, you're going to want to be 100% against Max Holloway. This man is an absolute monster. But listen, it's hard to pick against Holloway. It really is. It's hard to say, man. But I like Volkanovski's chances. I like the physicality. I like the aggression. I like the power that he brings to the table, and I like the mindset because I think he's got the mindset it takes to go up against a buzzsaw like Max Holloway. So I'm leaning towards the upset here. It could be a great night for you fine folks down under.
Yeah, there's some amazing fights this weekend. And as we let you go, yet another one, John. Obviously, you got Germaine De Randamie taking on Amanda Nunes in the rematch. I mean, what are you expecting from this one? A lot of people saying, you know, De Randamie could be almost a sleeper as far as the upset goes. Amanda looking so dominant, without a doubt, the GOAT of women's MMA. But De Randamie, so good on the feet, so technical. How do you see this one playing out?
Listen, that's what I'd say is Amanda Nunes is the women's GOAT. There's no question about it. It's amazing. But anybody sleeping on GDR here, I get it. It's another kind of fighter where I think her reputation and some of the decisions she's made outside of the cage have led people to minimize what she's capable of doing inside of it, you know, because they don't like the fact that she didn't want to face Cyborg, because they don't like the fact that she was willing to give away the belt. Now they're going to say that she doesn't have the skills. No, she does. She absolutely has the skills on the feet. She is a dangerous fighter. I don't know that, you know, I'd pick anybody over Amanda Nunes right now. Amanda is phenomenal. But this is, you know, Amanda has to go out there and execute. This is not the kind of fight where Amanda Nunes can just walk in there and go, hey, I'm Amanda Nunes, so I'm definitely going to win this fight. No. She has to stick to a game plan. She has to execute. And I wouldn't be surprised to see her kind of go back and lean on her grappling base a little bit. Not that she can't outstrike Germaine. She can. But that's where Germaine's most dangerous. And I think, you know, a smart game plan would be honestly probably to take her to the ground and work on something there. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Amanda Nunes do that.
And Amanda Nunes sneakily getting onto all the biggest UFC cards in history, starting from UFC 200 in the main event and just keeping that momentum going. I think when we look back at her legacy, I mean, Jesus Christ, she's been on some of those big cards. I wonder what's next for her. That's some great analysis. Of course, he is John Morgan. Guys, make sure to check out his coverage of UFC 245. John Morgan, Kenny, Mike Bond, of course, the team over at MMA Junkie, the MMA Roadshow, one of the best shows out there. Of course, follow the man at MMA Junkie, John. And John, just quickly as we're wrapping up the year with the final episode of Submission Radio, just want to congratulate you on another stellar year. I know you haven't been able to get to all the shows that you wanted to, but I mean, you have been able to deliver some absolutely amazing content. Of course, always the voice that starts the press conference. We appreciate you being there and making the media week so easy for all of us. People don't realize all the work that you do in the back end, so we appreciate you, man, and hope you have a great end to 2019.
I appreciate it. It means a lot. I know you guys understand the grind, so thank you for that, man. I appreciate it. It's always fun to work with you guys, and thanks for having me on, man.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys. Our next guest is known for his fantastic analysis on both Morning Combat, the Luke Thomas Show on SiriusXM, and of course his very own live chat. He is kind enough to jump on and help preview UFC 245. Luke Thomas himself, our dear friend, is back on Submission Radio. Luke, I feel like Christmas cheer has come early because here you are on webcam on Submission Radio. Am I getting the right vibes here or what?
I don't know. Is it because my face is being eaten by gray and I look like Santa Claus? Something like that?
Not at all, man. Because you're the early Christmas present we've been dying for, right?
Oh, I see.
It's
sure.
if
you want to label it?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more like Will Ferrell and Elf, I suppose. Just some kind of ogre out of my depth, but yeah, that works.
Santa Claus, early version of Santa Claus before he fully turns into him.
That's it.
Before we talk about UFC 245, Luke, the last time we saw you was in New York. You were kind enough to do our post-fight show, and we were all drinking from Jorge Masvidal's cup post-fight. A lot of people worried in the comment section that we were all going to catch something, you know, the Black Plague or something. Is it safe to say you made it out 100%? No ramifications after drinking from the cup. You're not dealing with black lung or anything.
No, I'm fine. I mean, look, drinking out of someone's shoe is gross, and yes, what we did was kind of gross. But also, Jorge gets, medically examined. I don't know about you two degenerates, but Jorge gets examined, and then we were drinking quite literally alcohol, which people use to kill germs. So I liked my chances. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, if you catch anything, it's from us, not from Jorge.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what you two are up to. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, I said the same thing to myself as I was drinking out of that cup, and look at me now. The doctor says I had a pre-existing condition, Luke, so it wasn't anything from the cup. Now, let's talk about this year, man, because it's been an excellent year for yourself. You've had some big career changes. You started new things like Morning Combat. You also wrapped up the MMA Hour. We head into 2020 career-wise. Just want to quickly get your thoughts, man. How would you compare the end of 2019 compared to 2018, a big year for one Luke Thomas?
I'd say it's a big year for change, which I appreciate what you boys saying that. It's a big year for change, but candidly, it's, I had to restart or change projects. So I felt like, bringing the live chat back was one thing. I'll have done 10 or 11 episodes by the time the year is over. So I'm pretty happy with that. And of course, as you mentioned, moving on in Morning Combat, and every week, I feel like that show gets better and better. And by the way, there's big changes coming to the show in 2020. I mean, it's going to be me and Brian Campbell, but I mean, the way it looks might be a little bit upgraded. So Keep that in mind as well. So there's some big changes there. But what I really felt like what I did was I felt like I was headed on the wrong path. I want to say like it was some kind of terrible path, just not the appropriate path for me. And then I got on the right path. So I feel like I have a lot of building still left to do. I'm not coasting on an institution that I've built yet, but I would like to keep building the ones that I have and keep going. And I think I'm grateful that I was able to set the path in the proper direction this year. That's what I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always respectable to see someone who makes a really big career change, because it's not easy. I know even just things like, location and obviously outlet and stuff like that. So it's really cool that you did that. I know you're just coming off the symposium in DC, so I'm just wondering, for anybody listening, any kind of aspiring future journalists or MMA journalists or media members, after going through the process that you did, any advice on people and sort of, the way that you handle things and sort of, switched up your career?
I say this all the time. I mean, there's so many different things I could recommend depending on the particular line of work, because everybody's going to have a slightly different need and a particular dynamic that has to be resolved for the very specific nature of what's happening. But the one thing I've been saying that I stick to is, and again, no system is without complication or error or fault. But I just believe that, like, if you want to have some sustainability in MMA, being well-rounded helps and that kind of thing. But you got to make sure you are the brand. I mean, look, even this, I haven't used it yet, but I still have I got my own mic flag with my own name on it. Nice. Like when I had my logo made and I had this kind of stuff, dude, it felt really, really awkward. It was like, oh my God, you're just pushing yourself out there to the world in this, quite frankly, heavy-handed way. But in the end, what you begin to realize is, there are so many media and other kinds of institutions in MMA, promotions, media organs, everything in between, and they come and they go. If you can invest in yourself, there's a lot more, I think, we'll see, but I think there's a lot more long-term sustainability. I'm not as reliant on other entities as a lot of other MMA media members. I've got a lot of built-in audience that I don't need their permission to engage. And it's nice to have, of course, and I'm going to use it, but I'm going to keep building on just me as well. So that's why I've never taken my foot off the gas on my own YouTube channel, because it's all mine. And build in yourself. That isn't, there's different ways to do it, but build in the brand that is your name.
Absolutely. I think people really appreciate the authenticity that you bring, Luke. Like you mentioned, I think that's why your YouTube channel is such a big hit. We saw at the end of November, there was that article that came out where you sort of spoke about the reality of MMA media. And you pointed out something that a lot of us already knew, but didn't really have the guts to say, that you have to attach yourself sometimes to power to get a little bit further in the industry. I'm just wondering, when you were thinking of saying that, did you have any hesitation at all in sort of being so honest and letting people know? And how do you feel about the reception that that's gotten? Because a lot of people have really appreciated you being so honest and so open about the media and the landscape and sort of what people have to do and what it's really like.
Candidly, I've not paid attention to the reception. I don't know what people said.
They're happy
to be honest with you. Oh, is that right? Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, you say things that are true, whether they're receptive, people are receptive to it or not. Did I have any hesitation in saying it? No, none whatsoever. I mean, what's so funny? I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, this is why I say be invest in yourself and be well-rounded. Here's a perfect example. It's like, I did TV in 2012 in this country on Spike TV, MMA Uncensored Live. And after that was over, I was like, man, I don't know if I'll ever get back on TV here again. And if it comes to MMA, I probably won't. But I'm this close to being on TV again with Showtime in boxing. And that's a sport I don't even cover all that much. I mean, I always wanted to, but by virtue of, necessity for MMA coverage, it wasn't all that much of an option. I mean, I've covered boxing intermittently the last 7 or 8 years, but it wasn't like a huge part of what I did. But, it's not that I don't think I have the ability to do those kinds of things. So the MMA industry it doesn't make any sense. Like, it should not be the case that I'll be on TV for boxing before I'll be on TV for MMA again. It should not be the way that it is, but it probably will be that way. It just, and you're lucky either way, of course. Like, it's all, pinch me, dream come true scenarios. I'm just saying, like, that would not have, if you would ask me 2 years ago, what would you be on TV for next first? It would not have been that. So the point being is, like, yeah, there are consequences to saying that stuff in the industry. Yes. But if you build in yourself and you diversify your skill set, you can find a lot of different ways to thrive. And I think, I've gotten some success in that regard.
That's awesome, man. The fact that you're so close to being on TV on Showtime is awesome. And I guess also kind of, going back to the first question about how end of 2018 compared to 2019 compares, I guess that's kind of confirmation for you that you're sort of heading in the right direction, career-wise and everything. But, of course, we did bring you on here to talk about UFC 245, so we do want to pick your brain about that, Luke. I want to kick off with the main event, Colby Covington with Kamaru Usman. Obviously, Colby retold the story recently about how the UFC didn't want him initially, I believe it was after the Damian Maia fight, or after the Damian Maia win. What do you think his value is now in the UFC, and how much do you think they value him? Do you think they're sort of looking back now going like, man, thank God we kept this guy? Or do you think they kind of just see him as, another body, given that he hasn't really proven yet to be a pay-per-view draw?
Well, let's assume what he said was true, which, by the way, it may not be, right? Yeah. Or at least it might be like 80% true or something, But let's assume what he said is 100% true for the purposes of this conversation. I doubt they probably are. Listen, I doubt that they're saying, oh, my God, we are so glad we kept him. But they might be saying, you know what? We are glad that we leaned on the guy to do something about it. We are glad that we pressured the guy to do something about it, even if part of that pressuring has been, rolling up on Dana White at poker tables and calling him all manner of, like, terrible names, and certainly saying controversial things about Brazil being filthy animals and everything else in between. I mean, they might have some trepidation about that. Hard to say. But I think in general, they're kicking the pants kind of pep talk, if that's really what happened. I suspect that they value it. Now, the point about, is he a pay-per-view star? Well, of course not yet. Like, I mean, it takes a long time to become one. Even someone as good as Anderson Silva took a long time to get there. So no, I mean, it's not. But, like, look, it's so weird. It's like, dude, I could not find Colby's political views more different from my own. But there's this weird thing that happens where it's like, oh, I don't like Colby, so therefore I'm going to say he's not very good of a fighter, and I'm going to find ways to say his numbers weren't very good. Oh, his numbers weren't good in Newark. Dude, the fight was at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Like, what? I mean, what are people talking about? For the fight being in the middle of the day, those numbers were great. They were great. I mean, they weren't like enormous, but they were very, very respectable numbers. And go look at, for example, on Food Truck Diaries he did with Brendan Schaub. His numbers are almost the sum total of Tyron and Kamaru's appearance put together.
Wow.
It's like this idea that, like, that people don't care about him. I'm not telling you he's some huge star. That takes years to build. But this idea that, like, he could come or go and no one would know the difference relative to any other fighter that you could put in that place, that is just absolutely not the case. So, like him or hate him, understand what the reality is.
And let's say he does not win the title this coming weekend, Luke. What would you say, and we'll get your thoughts on who you think is going to win in a second, but what would you say Colby Covington's legacy in the sport would be, his footprint? Let's say he makes it all the way to this title, he doesn't win it. There's people like Chael Sonnen out there, there's people like Conor McGregor out there, they're known for their types of trash talk. Ultimately, Covington is a guy that's sort of, in a way, used the political platform to become a heel or become, a hero in certain parts of the country. Is there going to be some kind of, I suppose, legacy or story that he leaves behind that's different to a lot of other fighters that have sort of used trash talk to get to a title shot?
I think I would argue that, there's, it's funny. I think he's moving much more into the Chael Sonnen territory, if I can be honest with you. Have you guys not felt the shift a little bit? Let me set this up for you if I can. Chael didn't do it in the same way that Colby did it, nor did he have the same origin with things. But here's what I mean. When Colby first started saying the things he was saying, yes, he was very pro-Trump and all that kind of stuff, and he leaned into it. But he was also doing like Star Wars spoilers, and he was, and if you missed weight, he would go after Mackenzie Dern and stuff like that when she missed weight, for just no apparent reason. Like he was just spraying the block with the AK-47. It didn't matter if he hit grandma or the gang member. And right. And now I don't see that. I mean, I'm not saying he's completely stopped, but I don't see him Avengers Endgame came out. I didn't see any spoilers. I guess we'll see what happens with Star Wars and if he wins, but he didn't do any of that. He's not as active on social media in terms of that kind of thing. He's done some of that, of course, but what I think he's done is he's really leaned into the Trump thing as an identity. I mean, if you guys watch the episode of Embedded today, which is, we're recording this, the one I saw today was he's wearing a Trump hat, talking about Trump and meeting the first family while checking into the Trump hotel. Now, who would do such a thing? Only the most hardcore Trump supporter, which maybe he is, and I'm sure he does like Donald Trump. My point being is there's this performative act of pro-Trumpness he puts on, and it has a lot of the effect of needling people in this country. You could all understand why. But at the same time, it's got the effect of currying favor with an audience that is very receptive to that kind of needling. Whereas before he was just kind of spraying everybody. Now it's a bit selective with it. And that's a little bit more again, Chael's very, very different, but it's a little bit more in keeping with I'm going to annoy some people while befriending others, whereas I'm just going to piss off the entire free world.
Yeah.
So I know I'm not quite answering your question with that, but you're asking what the legacy is. The legacy is going to be, it might be too little too late with that, because if he ends up losing, there are still a lot of people that are going to have the knives are out, man. The knives are out for him, and people are waiting to sink the knives. Yeah. So if he loses, it's going to be, are there ways to be a heel while being one that everybody loves, or at least many people love? And did he go too far? He'll be a cautionary tale, I think, about what happens when you go too far. If he loses, but he might. So.
Yeah, I noticed with the comments, because we've had Colby on a lot of times, and I feel like when we first used to get him on, it was just 100% hate, and then over time it was you know what, I didn't like this guy, but now I really like him, and he's really funny and he's entertaining, which I think is kind of similar to Chael Sonnen as well, right? Against Anderson Silva, people hated him, and then it was Chael's just a funny guy, we're entertained by what he says. I also find it funny with the UFC how they use this thumbnail for Embedded as if Colby said something outrageous, he's angry looking, but actually it wasn't at all. He was pretty normal in the Embedded, and he was just speaking passionately, but they cut it right at the moment where he looked like he was saying something angry. But I wanted to ask you, Luke, people often talk about the similarities between Colby and Kamaru Usman's styles, but I'm wondering, what would you say are the biggest differences between them as fighters?
So Fight Metric just gave me a bunch of data I have to look over that may change some of this, but based on the information that I have at the moment and the tape that I've received. And by the way, there's been a change in Colby Covington's style from early fights to more recently. He has evolved as well, and Kamaru to an extent as well. But the basic difference is this, especially if you want to look at their more recent contests. The prevailing difference is that, again, there's a rule in wrestling from referee's position, if you guys ever see it in American high schools or colleges, where one guy will get on his knees and then his hands, and then he'll be facing this way. The person will get behind them. They'll wrap the waist and then the elbow, put my hand here. And then as soon as they touch the elbow, the referee blows the whistle. And if you can escape, you get a point, right? And that's what's called referee's position. But from that position, you are not allowed to lock your hands. Why? Because if you get anybody who knows how to lock their hands properly and has wrestling strength, it's very, very hard to break. Jose Aldo is very good at breaking it. Obviously, there's no such thing as referee's position in MMA. I bring this up because if you notice what Colby Covington does, he used to go for real static positions, flatten you out, go to pass, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't really do a whole lot of that anymore. He kind of gets you wrapped around the waist. He picks you up. He mat returns you. He might go for a half-hearted choke like he did on Robbie Lawler, but he controls you the entire time. He's in the dominant position, It's not like dominant jiu-jitsu positions where, it's very staged, or not stages and phony, but like there are stages to it. And instead, he just keeps his hands locked the whole time. He doesn't do a lot of ground and pound. But when he's standing, he just has constant output on the feet, right? Throwing 500 strikes against Robbie Lawler over the course of 5 rounds. It's 100 strikes a round, And again, half of them, if not more, aren't doing much. But it's just the raindrop never stops. Kamaru Usman's a little bit different. He can strike on the feet a little bit, obviously. He's got bigger power. He's probably the more physical of the two. But when he wrestles, he likes to get like wrist control, break your posture, and then go for ground and pound. So just think about it. Both guys have a lot of like stick to you, 5 rounds in your face, take you down kind of thing. But when Colby is wrestling, he's wrestling. When Kamaru is wrestling, he's wrist riding to break, and then he's going for ground and pound. The question you have to ask yourself for Saturday is, who can do that to the other one? Can Colby stop the takedown enough to strike here? Or can Kamaru take him down enough to pound on him and control him? Really, it's an interesting matchup.
I guess the fascinating thing here is, for a great legacy, you need a great opponent. And for Kamaru Usman, beating a guy like Colby Covington, this early in his title reign could do great things for his legacy ultimately down the track. But I'm just wondering, a lot of people are pretty down on Colby Covington because of his persona. Where do you rank him in terms of, some of the best guys in the division right now and his skill set? Do you believe he is the best guy, one of the best guys in the division right now?
Yeah, I mean, if he's not one, he's two. Leon Edwards is very good. Tyron Woodley is very good. Jorge Masvidal is very good. Jorge creates some interesting challenges, and I think Tyron would be a difficult choice early. But I think that probably Colby beats them. I mean, I don't know that, one never, especially with Jorge, one never knows. Jorge seems very capable of great things, so that's a bit of I'd love to see the fight for that very reason. But, I've said this before. It's like, Colby sucks and Kamaru's going to run over him. You sure about that? I mean, he might, again, this is not me saying to discount Kamaru. The point is not to discount Kamaru. Kamaru is an incredible champion, deservedly so. And what he did to Tyron Woodley is just incredible. You'd be very foolish to think that Colby Covington is some kind of scrub because you don't like him or you find his political views odious or whatever. Those are not, whatever you feel about those are not methods of detecting. And I mean, imagine you were a talent scout for the UFC and Colby Covington fought for another organization. And then someone from the organization asked you, how good is Colby Covington? And your answer was, he's really pro-Trump. I mean, they'd be like, and what? I mean, that's not the question we asked you.
They'd be like signed on the spot.
Yeah, well, they might if they wanted some kind of personality or they like Trump or whatever. But if you're asking somebody, how good is this guy? And your answer is he's super pro-Trump. You're so far away from understanding what the challenge is at hand that, you just can't be taken seriously. So yeah, he's either number 1 or number 2 in that division as far as I'm concerned. He is an excellent fighter. He has a very good strategy. He knows how to execute it well. He's still young enough. He hasn't taken hardly any damage. He stays in good shape. Dude, he's a handful. He's a handful. And I think Kamaru Usman's got the fight of his life this weekend.
Yeah, well, I feel like if you look at their last fights, Colby versus Robbie Lawler and Usman versus Tyron Woodley, they were both kind of eye-opening performances where we didn't realize just how good they were, and they beat those guys, and the way they beat them, and it was like, holy crap, these guys are so much better than we thought. I'm wondering who you sort of lean towards heading into this fight this weekend, and also, do you think it's going to be a case where, the fight will be dictated pretty early, like if Kamaru Usman can take Colby down, that will be sort of how the rest of the fight will look, or do you think maybe the wrestling cancels each other out, and then we have a bit of a war on the feet where both guys are trying to sort of implement their game plan?
Well, here's the thing about that. It's like, if the wrestling cancels each other out and they strike on the feet, well, then you have to favor Colby because Colby's just going to be Chinese water torture all over him, you're like, Kamaru hits harder. Well, yes, but Robbie Lawler hits harder. Robbie Lawler hits way harder than Colby Covington. What happened there, right? So if the wrestling ends up canceling out, you got to love Colby's chances there, actually. The thing is, if it stays on the ground and Kamaru's on top, dude, Colby's in trouble. This is what's so interesting about this fight, right? It's that you look at the stats, they tell you a lot of different things. But I was going to do my dissected on it for Morning Combat yesterday, and then I was looking at the records, I was looking at the numbers, and you're just like, dude, they just haven't faced anybody like this before. Now, Colby's had a little bit more trouble, I think, flashing his wrestling acumen than Kamaru has relative to the opposition they faced. But that may not be anything that happened way early in Colby's career, you know? So it's not exactly the most scientific way to look at things. But like the reality is, dude, you know, Colby's going to have to face somebody that he's never really faced before and then do the things he's been doing. Can he do that against somebody with that kind of a skill set? I don't know. Same with Kamaru. Kamaru is used to holding people down and then pounding on them. Well, how are you going to do that against the D1 All-American? The answer is he just might. But he hasn't shown that against anybody else like that. So if you're asking which way I lean, I'll pick some other ones for the other title fights. But for this one, I am quite agnostic, man. It is very, very for me to read. And here's the other part. It could end up going there and being some kind of blowout, too, because we're all not quite sure how it's going to go. My only hunch is they always say in wrestling, the person who initiates a scramble tends to win it, all things being equal. My hunch is the person who really gets after the takedown, who really gets after the control in that position, is going to be the one who wins it. So let's see what that guy is.
Going to be fascinating, man. It's going to be mental games, size versus speed, skill sets. It's going to be amazing to see who wins that one. Let's look at another really exciting title fight, though. Alex Volkanovski, our guy from down here in Australia, who's had this crazy journey to the title shot, fought multiple times with serious injuries in the UFC, wouldn't say anything, and then ends up winning his fights, ends up going through Chad Mendes, Jose Aldo, finds himself fighting Max Holloway this weekend for the title. I mean, when it comes to looking at Volkanovski's last win over Aldo, many people thought he would have to mix things up, take Aldo down, but he was able to beat Aldo on the feet. How much of a challenge do you think Volkanovski presents to Holloway on the stand-up, and especially knowing that Volkanovski prefers longer guys when he fights?
He does prefer longer guys?
Yeah, he enjoys fighting guys with reach. He prefers it over... And this is coming from, there's a gym down here in Melbourne where he trains quite frequently, coming from the coaches. Apparently he is better against longer guys.
That's interesting. I actually spoke to Frankie Edgar today, and I asked him, what was so hard about fighting Max Holloway? And he actually said something kind of funny. He said it was not his reach per se, like the hands, how far they were from his face. It was his body type is so long, he's hard to manipulate because everything is so far apart. We'll see how that matches up with Volkanovski if when they get against the fence, which I think they will. Yeah, I went and I watched that Aldo fight. Aldo had a really bad game plan. Now I don't want to take anything away from Volkanovski because I believe that of all the live dogs, like which of the challengers, because all the challengers for the title fights on this card are underdogs. Which of them is the livest underdog, so to speak? And I would say Volkanovski is. You could argue Covington as well. Who knows? And it could end up being De Randamie, but my hunch is that it's Volkanovski. He's a load. Now, in terms of the Aldo fight, Aldo had a really bad game plan. He basically borrowed the same counterpunching game plan that he used against Frankie Edgar at UFC 200, where if you go back and you watch, this is the cage. He just took center, and then Volkanovski rotated around it. And that just didn't work for him. If you look at what Volkanovski does, because he also trains the City Kickboxing now, right, with Eugene Behrman and all those guys in New Zealand, he's got and I try to explain this to people. Imagine having a really good striking game and then adding a layer of total camouflage on top. That is essentially what they have done for him. And again, all of his other trainers too, but that's the position he arrives in. Aldo couldn't ever get a read on him. So think about it this way. If the guy needs space to move laterally, side to side, in and out, if he needs room to feint, he's slipping, he's showing, he's doing whatever he's doing, all the different setups, he's switching stances through combination, the whole bit. You need space and time to do that. If you just stand in the center and wait, you're giving that person everything they need to exact that kind of game. My hunch is, I don't know this, of course I don't know this, but my hunch is that Holloway is going to try and probably get in his face a little bit, slowly at first, and then heat up and push him back. Easier said than done. But Volkanovski can stall him against the cage if he needs to. I doubt he'll get the takedown because Max's takedown defense is so good. So for me, the question will be, to what extent does Holloway, because I think in order to corral Volkanovski, he's going to have to eat punches on the way in, which he's often willing to do. The question is, does that end up being a mistake like it was against Dustin Poirier? You know, Poirier just brought the thunder against him, and Volkanovski can hit like a Mack truck. So that'll be really interesting to me, is to what extent can he corral him? And in the process of trying to do that, how much damage does he take while Volkanovski is able to move? Because movement is key to what Volkanovski does. It's not to say that Volkanovski won't push into Mountain Holloway at times, I think he will. If you go back and watch the Aldo fight, he would push Aldo against the fence, underhook him, and then try to take him down, and then blast him with knees up the middle and stuff like that, and then to the thigh. He might do the same to Holloway, but my sense is Holloway will win only if he's coming forward and pushing Volkanovski back. You got to constrict Volkanovski. You give him all that room, and I don't know who could beat him.
It's fascinating because I know when Volkanovski spoke to us, he kind of spoke about how Max is he's a volume guy, but he doesn't really have the power to threaten him or hurt him. So Volkanovski's like, I'm basically willing to take or expecting to take a couple of punches to dish out a big one and sort of hurt Holloway. So it's going to be interesting how those game plans sort of come together. I'm wondering, because you've spoken a lot about feints and the great work that Eugene Berriman does at City Kickboxing, how good Volkanovski's feints are and how much of a factor they could be here. And also, Max is he's been super, super dominant at featherweight, right? But then he went to lightweight, didn't have, the success that he wanted. And then after the Frankie Edgar fight, a lot of people were like, is this the same Max Holloway? Especially when you consider some of the issues that he's had with his health and weight cutting. And I think people not really wanting him to stay at featherweight for too much longer. Do you think this is still the same best version of Max Holloway that we're seeing?
Well, I mean, all that damage adds up at some point. I suspect it probably is beginning to take a bit of a toll because he does take, to think that you fought Frankie Edgar and Dustin Poirier and now you're going to fight Volkanovski in the same year. Jesus Christ, man, that is a lot. Now, he had a lot of time off before that, I suppose, but you get the idea. So that is just crazy. That is absolutely crazy to me. But he seems game for it, and I guess we'll see. I am expecting Holloway to look relatively normal-ish. About Volkanovski saying he doesn't hit hard. Well, that's if you can see it and then kind of roll with it. But remember what Max Holloway does? He'll change angles and then stances on you, and you're not in the position you're supposed to be in, and then he'll crack you, and that's when he really hurts. It was when the first time he got Aldo. Remember, Aldo slipped the punch, and then rather than rolling and then coming up the top, he just came back to the center. And then Max popped him when he wasn't expecting it, and then dropped him. Right? It's that kind of a thing when your defense gets a little slow, you just come back to the center. In the case of Aldo, he hit him. So if Volkanovski doesn't make any defensive errors and can see all the punches coming, yeah, maybe Max doesn't hit that hard. But Max's trick is volume and also catching you when you least expect it. So that'll be I think a big test for Volkanovski. But I'm not expecting. I'll say this. I'm not expecting Max to look like some kind of a shell of himself. I will say, though, that the amount of damage he takes, I think the end of his prime will come sooner than others by virtue of the fact that he got started in the game so early. And he's not been like some kind of, kickboxer who plants his feet and doesn't move his head and just, rah. He doesn't have that kind of a style. He moves a lot, too. Remember, Max is a very modular game. He can go this way. He can go this way from this stance, from that stance. He can fight as well orthodox as he does southpaw. He's incredible. But as I mentioned, he'll trade with you a little bit to get himself in the right positions. And you do that enough over time, it'll add up. I just don't think that'll be the fatal flaw Saturday.
I mean, you mentioned to us that you're happy to tell us who you're leaning towards in the other title fights. So if you had to sort of give us a little prediction who you think is going to win it, Luke, do you think it's going to be Alex Volkanovski sort of getting the upset win, or is Max Holloway going to be able to add to his legacy?
Yeah, I'm going to lean ever so slightly Holloway. Because I do think that some of the ways that Aldo accommodated him, Max will not. But I think that is one where you're heading into the fifth. It's going to be 2-2. I don't see any scenario where we're heading into the fifth and it's like, 4-0 or 3-1 Max. I don't. In fact, what I could see is that Max drops at the first couple and has to rally, as a matter of fact. I think that Volkanovski is going to push him through the paces. And honestly, when I say predictions, like I'm doing a probability thing. I'm doing like a 55-45 kind of a thing. Even 50-49. I lean Holloway, but I've been trying to tell folks, man, Volkanovski is not the one to sleep on. If you're thinking that Max is just going to go in there, and I haven't heard of Volkanovski, and you beat Aldo, Aldo's washed. He's no good. You're in for a rude awakening on Saturday because that dude can absolutely scrap. He is well-trained. He is an excellent athlete. He is hardcore motivated for this, and those are the toughest guys to fight, one after the other when they line up like that, and he is especially talented. So I am going to be watching that one very closely.
And with Eugene Berriman, he's got Israel Adesanya, who's the champ. He's got Kai Kara France on this card. Dan Hooker having a phenomenal year. What would it mean for Alex Volkanovski to win this title for City Kickboxing? In your opinion, as to where they sit on the rankings of the gyms in the world right now?
Man, I got to tell you what. In some ways, you would just be amazed at it, and in other ways, you'd be like, "Yeah, that sounds about right. That's about what they're good at." Remember when and this is obviously very different, but remember when Dwayne Ludwig. What am I saying? When Dwayne Ludwig went to Team Alpha Male, and then all of a sudden, all those guys striking just leveled up all at once.
Yeah.
Eugene's been with those guys for a long time, but Eugene has been very clear to me about this. He told me this. He was like, "Look, do we think that we have the best jiu-jitsu in the world? Well, no. I mean, they believe that their jiu-jitsu is very competitive and very good. That's some kind of fatal flaw, but they don't see themselves as like, Atos or Alianse. That's not who they see themselves as. Or wrestling. Like, do they think that they're the best wrestlers in the world? Again, they like their wrestling. They like their chances with the wrestling. They train it. They think they're very good at it, but they don't think that's where they're world leaders. Where they think they're world leaders is with striking, because they have looked around to the rest of the MMA world. And I was at a boxing event for Showtime this weekend. You could see it in boxing a little bit too. There are people who feint, and there are people who don't. And there are people who are good at it, and there are people who are not. And you don't want to boil everything down to feinting. But when you see it at the level at which City Boxing incorporates it, meaning the volume and then the sophistication of it, dude, I don't think the MMA world just understands. Seriously, I mean this. The MMA world does not understand what those boys in New Zealand are doing. They do not get it. They look at it and say, "Oh, well, that's not that big a deal." Wrong. And two, they don't realize how important it is for it's a distinction. I mean, understand, how could it be that a gym in tiny New Zealand is out here schooling these bitches? Right? They're doing something right. They're doing something right, It's because they understand there's a piece of the game in MMA that they are exceptional at, that everybody else either doesn't do or is mediocre at best at. And they are kicking people's asses as a result.
Well put, and I hope that's in Volkanovski's post-fight speech either way. We're schooling these bitches. Luke, really appreciate your time, man. You've given us a lot of it. I just want to quickly ask you about Amanda Nunes versus Germaine De Randamie before we get out of your hair, just because it is so crazy to see where these women have gone and how far they've gone since their first fight. I believe it was in 2013. Nunes is without a doubt the GOAT, and De Randamie is, improved leaps and bounds and on a good streak of her own. What would you say are the biggest improvements to De Randamie's game since their first fight, and how different are you expecting it to go? Do you think there's a chance that De Randamie might even be the more technical striker and could outpoint Amanda Nunes on the feet?
Easily. I think she is probably the much better striker on the feet. Now, one never knows for sure. You're like, "Oh my God, she knocked out Cyborg." Well, Cyborg kind of fought dumb. Not up to Cyborg's potential. And the Holly Holm knockout was just nice. I mean, there's nothing you can say about that. That was just because Amanda Nunes is awesome, right? So I'll just take my hat off and say, you just outsmarted her. Okay, great. But dude, I don't think people understand who the Iron Lady is, in part because, her showing against Holly Holm wasn't all that great. And then, of course, punching after the bell, and then the whole Cyborg thing, and everyone hated her. But it's like, dude, her kickboxing is phenomenal. Look what she whipped Aspen Ladd around with one punch. I would say this, Valentina Shevchenko, with that sort of Thai style, gave Amanda Nunes a lot of problems on the feet. I don't see any reason why De Randamie couldn't do that. In fact, when they fought in 2013, you saw a little bit of that. I mean, not much, because she got taken to the ground pretty early, but you can see a reason why that would be the case. The big thing for me to look at here is, to what extent is this fight fought on the feet? Because if Amanda Nunes can just get the takedown and then pass, then, this is just 2013 all over again. But if De Randamie, you asked about the improvements, I don't know how good her takedown defense has gotten. We're about to find out, I suspect. And if she can keep it on the feet, is it competitive? Dude, to me, on the feet, it is a totally different fight than the idea that she could be taken down at will. So I am very curious to see what happens. And, if she ends up being taken down, well, then that's probably it. But pay attention. If De Randamie can fight that one off and keep it a distance, Amanda Nunes, she better be ready.
Well, I'll tell you what, Luke. I think you've gotten us even more excited for UFC 245. Guys, make sure that
it's a great card.
It's a great card, man, but great analysis as well. L. Thomas News on Twitter. Of course, Morning Combat airs every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. That's Tuesdays here in Australia. The Luke Thomas Live Chat is the place to go. And Luke, as we round up the year with the final episode of Submission Radio for 2019, just want to say how much we appreciate you coming on and being a part of our journey here in 2019. It's always an honor speaking to you, whether it's a live event or on the program, man. So happy New Year to your family, happy Christmas, and thank you so much for everything in 2019.
Yeah, feeling is mutual, boys. You guys are a great addition to the MMA media landscape, Australia and New Zealand, and the rest of the world, of course. But especially you guys do phenomenal work down there. MMA needs you guys, and it's always great when you come stateside, even though I know those flights are like hell. So you guys are doing great work this year. Congratulations on all your success, and can't wait to see you guys in 2020.
Thanks, so much,
man. Check us in the mail, Luke, and we appreciate your appearance. All the best this week at UFC 245. Love speaking to you, man.
All right, fellas, take it light.
Right. And there you guys go. Luke Thomas, happy to be wrapping up the last episode of the year with that, man. Luke Thomas with the nice words right at the end of that. I didn't expect that at all. And it means a lot to us coming from a guy who we've looked up to for a very long time and have a ton of respect and admiration for, and a guy that we're quite honored to be able to call a peer and work alongside. So really appreciate Luke's words, and really appreciate the time that he gave us and the incredible stuff that he said about UFC 245 while helping us preview the event.
Man, yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's a reason why you got John Morgan and Luke Thomas on the final episode of Submission Radio UFC 245 preview, and that is because these are two guys that behind the scenes, very modest guys, but behind the scenes have done so much for yourself, for myself, for a lot of the media members. I mean, I have seen Luke speak to people just starting out in the industry, to pros. I've seen him share people's work, be featured in people's shows, and really sort of push along this narrative of media members being there together. And with John Morgan, we mentioned it in that interview. I mean, that guy is the unofficial person who runs Fight Week. Whenever we come down, I mean, he without him, a lot of media people would really, really suffer. So both guys have been instrumental in us sort of getting to where we are, and it's an honor sort of having them. And Cass, just quickly before we wrap up, I have to mention that MMA History Today have this unbelievable poster of Jorge Masvidal.
Yeah.
Man, that is one badass poster. I know it was like a limited amount of time, and I'm not sure how much longer people can grab it for, because I think initially it was till the 11th of December, but there are friends over there, and that is one badass poster. And if you can get your hands on it, I don't know if you can message them, if you can plead with them, if you can go to their house and knock on the door and ask for it, but make sure to jump on and grab yourself one of those posters, man. What a work of art. Absolutely unbelievable. Grab yourself. Honestly, I think that and the Submission Radio t-shirt is a great Christmas present. Great Chris, straight out of Melbourne, and then a fantastic poster to boot. And I don't know, man, because back in the day, I know that it was really rare for people to get any kind of like MMA memorabilia. It was so hard to find. And these guys putting out these posters, these works of art, it's like...
it's actually art. It's not like something that you can just, print out or Photoshop. No, nothing against anybody that does Photoshop or anything, but like these guys draw it. It's art. It really does feel like something that's limited edition and sort of handcrafted in a sense. And like, I notice a lot of fighters and people have these posters. Like when we did John Anik last week, he had that poster of like some of the greatest rivalries of history that was done by MMA History Today. And then like I think Daniel Cormier shared it. I know a lot of fighters have those posters, and you see it here and there. Sometimes it's like an embedded or a countdown or something, and you see those posters featured. So it's crazy, and they're kind enough to send us these posters as well. I know like the background behind me is pretty crowded, but we got to find a way to somehow be able to feature them or show them on the show, because I think I've got at least two here on the walls that you can't see. So a massive shout out to those guys as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Love the hustle, love the grind. And with that, guys, that is the final episode of Submission Radio. Make sure to grab your Submission Radio merch, and don't forget that if you do grab it, make sure to tag us on social media. We love to see you guys in your Submission Radio merch. We love to share it. So if you tag us, we'll definitely retweet it. We'll definitely mention it in our stories. We appreciate everybody who spends every dollar on the Submission Radio stuff that they get. It means a lot to us. And Cass, the end of 2019, as we go out, any messages to the listeners?
Dudes, enjoy the fights this weekend. Enjoy the holidays, whether you're in a hot Australia with a crazy cooking summer. Christmas is probably going to be featuring seafood and barbecues and doing things by the pool. Or if you're over stateside, a lot of our friends in the US and Canada are probably going to be dealing with snow and coldness. All the more reason to enjoy the family and enjoy tons and tons of food. So whatever holiday you celebrate, we hope it's a great one. We hope you're safe. And we'll see you guys next year and 2020, kicking off Submission Radio coverage at UFC 246. So the first time you guys can look forward to that will be in Las Vegas, covering Conor McGregor versus Dylan Cerrone. We can't wait. Have a great holidays.
Perfectly said. We'll see you guys in 2020.